I broke promises regularly, making him feel insecure about our future. He left, and I'm sorry. Hey Reddit, longtime lurker here, but this is actually my first time posting. My name is Nina, and I'm 27 years old. My boyfriend's name is Sean, and he's 26. We've been together for about 3 years now, and our relationship has been a huge part of my life. We met back in college, and from the moment we crossed paths, there was something undeniable between us. We clicked instantly, but life had other plans. We were both incredibly busy with our studies, trying to make something of ourselves, haha, and neither of us was really in a place where we could fully commit to a relationship at the time. We had other priorities, careers to build, goals to achieve, so despite our connection, we went our separate ways after graduation. But about a year after we both left college, fate brought us back together. We ran into each other at a mutual friend's party, and it was like no time had passed. All those feelings that had been pushed aside came rushing back, and this time, there was nothing holding us back. We started dating, and it wasn't long before we were inseparable. Sean is one of the kindest, most thoughtful people I've ever met. He's the kind of person who goes out of his way to make others feel special, and he's always been like that with me. From the beginning of our relationship, he's done everything he could to show how much he cares. Whether it's planning surprise dates, leaving sweet notes for me to find, or just being there to listen when I need to vent, Sean has always gone the extra mile. He's a true romantic, the kind of person who believes in love deeply and isn't afraid to show it. In the beginning of our relationship, everything felt perfect. We had this incredible connection that made it seem like we were meant to be. We shared the same sense of humor, had similar values, and could talk for hours about anything and everything. It felt like I had finally found the person I was supposed to be with, and for a while I really believed that nothing could ever come between us. But as time went on, life started to get in the way again. The stress of our jobs, the pressures of adult life, and my own personal issues began to weigh heavily on me. I struggled with keeping my promises, both big and small, and that's where things started to unravel, I guess. Sean remained as dedicated and caring as ever, but I could see the change in him. The doubt began to creep into his eyes, and I noticed how he'd hesitate before believing me when I said I'd do something. Even though I knew my actions were hurting him, I couldn't seem to stop myself from letting him down. I was constantly making promises and breaking them, and it gradually eroded Sean's trust, and I guess made him reconsider our future together. Early in our relationship, we had a tradition of having a date night every Friday. It was our way to unwind from the week and reconnect, something we both enjoyed and cherished. But over time, I started canceling or rescheduling these dates. Sometimes it was due to work commitments or simply because I was too exhausted. Other times, I'd forget entirely about our plans. At first, Sean was understanding, but as the cancellations became a regular occurrence, he began to feel like our time together wasn't a priority for me. He'd try to make plans to accommodate my schedule, but my repeated failures to follow through wore him down. Then, there was a particularly moment that stands out painfully in my memory, our 2-year anniversary. We had discussed it for weeks, planned a special getaway for the weekend, and Sean had even taken time off work to celebrate with me. But when the day arrived, I got caught up with work and completely forgot about our plans. I called him last minute to say I couldn't make it because I had an important meeting that I had to attend. Sean's face was a picture of disappointment when he saw me on the video call. That look, his silent hurt, and the effort he had put into making the day special, stayed with me. I brushed it off at the time, convincing myself that work was a valid excuse, but I now realize that this incident was a turning point. These failures to keep my promises, especially the important ones, had a cumulative effect. The small things, like missing date nights, slowly compounded with bigger issues like forgetting our anniversary. Each broken promise eroded Sean's trust in me and made him question our future together. It wasn't just about the individual instances, but about the consistent pattern of letting him down. I could see it in his demeanor, in how he started to question my commitment and sincerity. Over time, breaking promises became a habit for me. It was like I had unintentionally pushed our relationship to the back burner, and it started to show. I kept making promises I couldn't keep, whether it was missing our date nights, forgetting plans, or being too tired to spend time together. My excuses, work, fatigue, social commitments, started to sound less convincing. I began to notice a change in Sean. He became less enthusiastic, more distant, and started to doubt my commitment. He was worried about our future and seemed to be questioning if I was fully invested in our relationship. At one point, his concerns even turned into suspicion that there might be someone else in my life. No matter how much I tried to reassure him, the repeated letdowns had already taken a toll. The last major promise I broke was the one that ultimately led to Sean confronting me. We had been talking about moving in together for about a year, but I kept postponing it for one reason or another. Each time we were supposed to go apartment hunting, I'd come up with an excuse: work, fatigue, personal issues. It seemed like every time I made a commitment, I failed to follow through, and it was starting to wear on Sean. Finally, it reached a boiling point. Sean was frustrated and hurt, and he gave me an ultimatum: either stop breaking promises or he would leave. I should have recognized the seriousness of the situation, but instead of apologizing, I became defensive. I told him he was overreacting and that a few missed plans weren't enough to end our relationship. That's when Sean really let it all out. He told me how I was a horrible person for constantly breaking promises. He brought up all the missed date nights and forgotten anniversary plans. He reminded me of my promises to communicate better, especially during arguments, but how I continued to bottle things up and shut down instead of talking to him. This left him feeling left out and unimportant. Sean pointed out that I had promised to share more about my life, my work stress, and personal issues, but I consistently failed to do so, making him feel even more isolated. Sean reminded me of how I had refused to move in with him. After about 2 years of dating, we both agreed to move in together, as it was the next step in our relationship, and even began making plans. Sean even started looking at potential apartments for them. However, I kept delaying the process, citing my busy schedule or saying I wasn't ready yet. Every time Sean brought it up, I'd push the date further, making vague promises that we'd move in soon. Sean said he eventually realized that I was avoiding the commitment, and it has made him question whether I was serious about our future together. Sean didn't stop there. He brought up a time when he was going through a tough patch at work and how I wasn't there for him emotionally. I was always too preoccupied with my own issues, even though he had always made time for me. I missed important conversations and didn't check in on him as I had promised, which made him feel like he was facing his struggles alone. This lack of support made him realize that I wasn't a reliable partner. He also mentioned how I constantly neglected family events. Sean had invited me to several family gatherings, knowing how important his family was to him. I'd promised to attend, but I would often cancel at the last minute due to work or other obligations I had forgotten. This not only disappointed him, but also made him feel embarrassed in front of his family. Over time, he began to feel that I wasn't making an effort to be part of his life, which made him question if I was truly invested in our relationship. Finally, Sean reminded me of how I had neglected our long-term plans. We used to talk about our future together, travel plans, career goals, and starting a family someday. We made lists of places we wanted to visit and things we wanted to do. However, as time went on, I became less interested in these discussions. I'd agree to plans in the moment, but later show little enthusiasm when it came time to act on them. Whether it was a planned vacation or a simple weekend getaway, my lack of follow-through made Sean feel like our dreams were slipping away, and with them, his confidence in our future. Sean didn't just stop there. It was clear he had made a thorough list of every instance where I had let him down. It felt like he was determined to drive home every point I had failed to address. He brought up how I had promised to be there for him during his serious health scare. I was supposed to be his rock, but I often canceled our plans or frequently showed up late, and I was constantly using work or personal issues as excuses. Sean told me how isolated and unsupported he felt during such a crucial time when he really needed me. He also reminded me about missing his sister's wedding and the family reunion, events I had committed to attending. I had claimed urgent work commitments and tiredness as reasons for my absence, but Sean said that it left him feeling embarrassed in front of his family, as he had already told them I would be attending. Sean then brought up the discussions we had about moving to a new city for better career opportunities. I had promised to support his career ambitions and be on board with the move, but I kept delaying the decision and eventually backed out. He didn't stop there. Sean also reminded me about how we had talked about setting up a joint savings account and budgeting for our future. I had agreed to being involved in managing our finances, but I often missed meetings and neglected to contribute to our savings. Sean reminded me of how I had promised to support him in his personal goals, like when he was training for a marathon. Despite agreeing to be his cheerleader and training partner, I frequently skipped practices and failed to attend the events. Finally, Sean talked about our mutual health goals, where we had planned to cook healthy meals together and exercise regularly. I frequently broke these promises by opting for takeout or skipping workouts. Sean said that all these incidents, though they might have seemed minor at the time, gradually chipped away at his trust in me. They led him to question whether our relationship had a solid foundation and whether we could truly build a future together. After Sean laid everything out and voiced his frustrations, he told me he wasn't going to continue running in circles with the conversation. He said he needed to step away to clear his head and get some space, and then he left. After he left, the reality of what was happening started to sink in. I tried to call him repeatedly, sending message after message, hoping for a response. I reached out through texts, voicemails, and even tried calling him from different numbers, but there was no reply. It's been days now, and he has still no contact. This behavior is so out of character for Sean. He's always been open to talking things out, even when we had disagreements. The fact that he's completely cut off communication is causing me a lot of anxiety. I'm worried about him, and I'm anxious about what this means for us. Not knowing what to do next is making me feel helpless. I want to make things right and show him that I'm committed to fixing what's broken, but I don't even know if he'll give me the chance to do so. All I can do right now is wait and hope that he'll eventually be willing to talk. But every day that goes by without hearing from him just deepens the uncertainty and fear I'm feeling. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I'm still getting a lot of negativity, and honestly, I understand why. I'm fully aware that I brought this on myself. For those of you who left positive or helpful comments, thank you, I genuinely appreciate it. So as I promised, here's an update. It didn't go quite as I'd hoped. My boyfriend finally replied to my messages and said we needed to talk. I suggested a phone call, but he wanted to meet in person. He didn't want to come over to my place, so I went to his place. We ended up having a long conversation. I kept apologizing and telling him that I now understood where he was coming from and how deeply sorry I was. I even told him I had plans to change if we could just make things work, but he told me straight up that he was done with me. I'm not kidding. He said he was completely over it. He told me he'd been patient for years, and if I hadn't changed by now, there was no way I'd change all of a sudden. I kept trying to convince him, but he was adamant. He said he was finished with us. He mentioned that he had a few things at my place and said he would call to let me know when he was coming to pick them up. I was devastated. I ended up sobbing uncontrollably and begging him to reconsider, but he just stood there, trying to comfort me while I cried. It felt like a punch to the gut. I was heartbroken and furious. How could he end things like that? 3 years together, and it felt like it all meant nothing. I left his place and haven't replied to his texts since. I guess I wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine, a little bit of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of silence. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I've seen some people trying to comfort me here, saying that my boyfriend might come to his senses and change his mind, but I honestly don't think that's going to happen. I've had my family and even some of my friends reach out to him, trying to plead my case, but he's been adamant that he's done with me. He's told them directly that no amount of begging or convincing will change his mind. In fact, he even went so far as to tell our mutual friends to stop talking about it or he'd cut them off. It's heartbreaking to hear that, especially since I thought we had a solid future together. It feels like the entire 3 years we spent together are just being thrown away because of my repeated failures to keep promises. I know I messed up. I rain-checked on plans and broke promises. Sometimes, a lot of times. But still, this feels so final. I keep telling myself, and I also know that he's going to regret this decision. I'm really struggling to accept that this might really be the end. Update. Hey Reddit, I guess this is really it. I'm starting to accept that this might truly be the end. My ex-boyfriend came over today to return the little stuff that he had at my place, and he even brought back some things I'd left at his. When he first arrived, I refused to let him leave. I was desperate and kept crying, clinging to him, begging him to stay and reconsider. Looking back, I know it was wrong of me to act that way. But when he threatened to call the cops if I didn't let him go, I realized I had no choice but to let him leave. In my frustration and pain, I cursed at him. Not my finest moment, I admit. I told him he'd regret this decision, that he'd miss me, and that he'd never find someone who loved him as much as I did. The worst part was when he actually laughed at that. He told me he never wanted to meet someone like me again. That stung more than I can say. I feel so embarrassed and angry at myself for how I acted and at him for being so cold. It's hard to believe that after everything we shared, this is how it ends. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I know many of you have been asking for updates, and honestly, I don't have much new to share. My life has been pretty miserable lately, and I'm feeling worse with each passing day. I've been struggling a lot since the breakup. I've been calling in sick to work more often than I should, and on the rare occasions I do make it in, I'm always late. I'm worried I might get written up or even fired, but at this point, I don't even know if I care. It feels like everything is falling apart, and I'm just barely holding on. I miss my ex-boyfriend so much. We had a deep connection, and I truly believed he was the one I'd spend the rest of my life with. It's so hard to grasp how everything ended so quickly. I'm now questioning everything, and I know deep down I can't really blame him for how things ended. I'm struggling to find a way to cope with all this pain and uncertainty. Update. Hey Reddit, just a quick update because I'm really angry and upset right now. As I had feared, I got fired from my job. I honestly thought I'd get a warning or maybe a write-up, not an outright dismissal. I'm completely at a loss for what to do next. I really needed this job, and now I'm not sure how I'm going to pay my bills or manage financially. I feel like I'm just floating through life, functioning on autopilot. I can barely remember what I do from day to day, and I spend most of my free time crying and missing my ex-boyfriend. Everything feels like it's falling apart, and I don't know how to pull myself together. I'm struggling to see a way forward, and I'm overwhelmed by everything that's happening. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. Sorry for not updating this month. Things have been pretty rough. I've been swamped with job hunting because I really don't want to move back in with my parents. They keep pushing me to break my lease and come home, but I'm determined to avoid that if I can. The job search has been grueling, and honestly, it feels like I'm getting nowhere. Every day is a struggle, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up. If I don't find something soon, I might have no choice but to head back home. It's a last resort for me, and I'm trying everything I can to avoid it, but the pressure is really starting to get to me. I've been trying to stay focused, but the stress is overwhelming. I've lost a significant amount of weight from all the stress, and my mood is all over the place, and I feel like I'm just floating through each day, barely keeping it together. I know it's not going great, and I just wish things would turn around. Update. Hey Reddit, it's been a few weeks since I last updated, and I'm sorry for the silence. I've been swamped and had to make a tough decision. I moved back in with my parents. I really didn't want to do it, but job searching was going nowhere, and it became my only option. The job market is terrible, and after hitting dead ends, I realized I had no other choice. So here I am, back at my parents' place, and it's been as bad as I feared. They've been inviting my ex over for dinner, even though they know how much it hurts me. I've heard he's moved on already and is seeing someone new. It's like a knife to the gut, and yet they keep treating him like family. They keep saying that no breakup will change their feelings towards him, and that they consider him their son, which just feels incredibly unfair. Worst of all, my ex always tries to talk to me whenever he's over, even though I do my best to ignore him. He constantly checks up on me and tries to talk, which just makes everything more awkward and embarrassing. I still have feelings for him, and I'm still struggling with the fact that I want him back. I feel guilty and regretful, and that's very hard to deal with when he's trying to make contact while I'm just trying to move on. It's like he's adding to the emotional mess I'm already dealing with, and I can't help but wish he'd just stop. Every time I try to talk to my parents about how this is affecting me, they either ignore me or shut me down. It's like they don't even hear me or care about how hard this is for me. This is exactly why I didn't want to come back here. I'm stuck in a place where I feel disregarded and hurt, and it's just making everything worse. Update. A lot of you suggested talking to my parents, which I did, even though I knew it probably wouldn't change much. I've tried discussing things with them multiple times, but it's like talking to a wall. They either ignore me, shut me out, or blame me for the breakup and say I caused it. They keep inviting my ex over for dinner, and it's incredibly awkward because I have to sit there and watch him. The other day, they even talked about inviting him and his new girlfriend over, and I had to tell them that if they did that, I would cut off all contact with them. I guess they saw I was serious because they backed off. I'm ramping up my job search as much as I can because I want to get out of here as soon as possible. I've been focusing on finding work and exploring side hustles to save up some money so I can move out quickly. I might not be around on Reddit much for a while, but this will probably be my last update unless something significant happens. I'm determined to find a job and get away from this situation before it makes my life any worse. I really appreciate all the positive comments and the DMs that checked up on me. Those were genuinely uplifting during this tough time. It's nice to know that some internet strangers out there actually care. It's been a very small silver lining in an otherwise shitty situation that is my life. As for the hate comments, honestly, I couldn't care less. They don't get to me.